Hi everyone, the clip you're about to watch was streamed live on Twitch. I stream every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I do Scraptail development as well as any tutorial requests. So pull through to the Twitch, let's hang out and enjoy the clip. First thing I'm going to do is go off to Miximo. And I'm just going to get some quick animations. So for example, I'm just going to get a quick idle. We can go with that. Sure. I also want a walk animation. For the point that I'm trying to make, just idling and walking will be okay. So I'm also going to get another simple idle, maybe with a torch. I know there's a torch idle somewhere. So we're going to go with that. There are a lot of things that we need to set up previously before we can actually use this, right? So we're going to go through all of those step by step. So the first thing we need to do is download the animations and set them up. So I'm going to do that real quick. Going to set this rig up as a humanoid, create from this model, apply. This will be all good. Set all of these up to fit that rig. So I want to now copy from this XBot avatar, apply, and I'm just going to set the animations up, even though these are very basic animations, so it shouldn't matter, but we are striving for perfection. Okay, we want all of these to loop, so we're just going to put the same settings in all of them. And if you want to change types, right, you're already applying a couple things, so you're applying that you need to change between these types, right? And now I'm going to create. First we need a simple character controller. So I'm just going to create something along those lines. And then I'm going to drag my XBot in here and put her at 0, 0, 0. Now let's set up our animator. I'm just going to call this character. Okay. And we need to create an animator for her. Animator controller. We're going to call this character animator. Character animator. Okay. And apply that. Now this, at the moment, doesn't have anything in it. We're going to start by just putting in the idle, okay, and putting in the, not this one, we want the walk forward, which is this one, okay. And we're just going to say that these are going to transition in between the two if a speed variable has been changed, okay. So we're going to create that speed variable, so speed, like so, and then if the speed is greater than 0 or 0.1, all right, then we change from one to the other, okay, like so, something along these lines. And if speed is less than 0.1, then we go back. Okay, this is what we're going to start with, and then we're going to explore a couple of options as to how we can change these and for the actual torch ones. But before we do that, let's set some other stuff up. So first I want this guy to have my character controller, and now we can start working on these things. And I'm just going to say real quick, first I need my animator. So private animator, let's get that animator. Thank you very much, Visual Studio. And I'm just going to say that if my input dot get key, not yet, so get key down or get key. If get key, then I want my key code to be W, sure. Then I want to walk forward, so I can just say animator dot set float. What did we call it? Speed, and I want this to be 1. Okay. Else, then I want this to be 0. Okay. It's been a while since I've used the old input system. Christ. Okay. So let's see just if that worked. Okay. So she's idling. If I press W, she starts walking. There we go. Okay. So with that in place, now we just need to figure out how can we change items, for example. And there's a couple of things that this implies. All right. First, we need to keep track or know what item are we holding. But before we even do that, we need to know what even is an item. Okay. Now, the best way of storing data about an item that I found is either by putting it in a file, or if you don't want to leave Unity, you can use scriptable objects. Okay. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to use scriptable objects to store that data. So I'm going to right click, create C# script, and I'm just going to call this item SO. All right. Now I'm just here, we are implying that every item is holdable, okay, kind of like in Minecraft. Open this up, put this in the namespace, what did I call it? Item animation transition. There we go. Put this in there. And it's just going to be a scriptable object. Okay, so create asset menu. Menu name is going just to be an item. And then file name is going to be just item is okay as well. Now we only want this to have a bit of data. In this case, the only data that is really relevant is the animation that is going to play. And now it depends. Okay, it depends on how we want to set this up, because there are multiple ways you can do this. Okay, now there are 3 ways that I can think of. Okay, and we're going to look at these in order from which I think are the least useful to the one that is the most useful, or rather the one that is easiest to use. Okay, so we're going to start very simple. Just simple animations that transition between each other, right? So let's say serialized fields, and I'm going to say private string base animation name, and it's just going to be set to idle. Okay, so this is the base animation that is going to play when you first activate this item. Okay, so if I go back here, for example, if I'm not holding anything, then my base animation would be idle. But if I'm holding the torch, so this is, I want these two, right? I'm going to say that this is torch idle, and I'm going to say that this is torch walk forward, or torch walking, sure. Okay, and I'm going to do exactly the same setup I did up here. So if the speed is greater than 0.1, then I don't want any exit time, and it just transitions. Okay, else if the speed is less than 0.1, then my exit time is also non-existent, and I want my transition to happen here. Okay, so in this case, if I go ahead and create a new torch item, then my base animation name would be torch idle. Okay, now how can we connect this to this, right? If I go to my character controller, we now need some sort of way of saying, well, let's say serialize field private item so my item. Okay, and right now we're just accounting for one item, but you could easily convert this to be an array. Okay, so we're gonna say that if I have an item, then I want to play its animation, right? I'm going to say private item so current item, and this my item is a bit misleading. I'm going to call this either owned item or available items. Owned item will be just fine. And then I'm going to have a private void equip item. Okay, and you could put parameters in here like Visual Studio was recommending me to know which item you should be equipping, or if you want this to be in order. Okay, right now we're going to assume that I only have one item, so I'm going to be equipping and just equipping that item. Okay, so right now I just want to say that my current item equals the owned item. Okay, and once I do that, I can say that I want my animator to play the current item dot base animation. Did I make it private? Yeah, I did. My bad. We want this to be public. Okay, I want to play my base animation name. Okay, and we're going to do that if input dot get key down, not s, get key down, key code dot e. Sure, why not? And if I do that, I want to equip item. Okay, if I do that and I tell my character that its own item is a torch, like so, if I now press E, it's going to equip that torch and play this base animation. Okay, so E we now have the torch idle playing. And if I move, it now uses these conditions instead of these conditions. Okay, so essentially you let the animator transitions dictate what animations should be playing. Okay, and you could divide this up into multiple trees depending on how many animations you have. Okay, now if you want to smooth this out, you could also, instead of saying play, you could say crossfade in fixed time. All right, but essentially we can say that we want to crossfade to that base animation in 0.2 seconds, for example. Okay, and it'll give it a bit more of a smooth transition. This is a long project. There we go. All right, so if I now press E, I can equip that torch. Right, now the problem is that I can dequip it, but then, you know, that's a bit besides the point. But I could say private void dequip item. Is that even a word? Well, and I can just say that current item equals null. Current item equals null. And I want my animator to crossfade to just my simple item after 0.2 seconds. Okay. So if I can copy this bit over here, and I can say Q instead, and I can say dequip item, for example. Okay, so by doing that, I can now equip the torch, dequip the torch. Okay, and even if I'm walking, if I equip the torch like so, now you have this awkward pause, and this is why I don't really like this method. Okay, Katyushka is now following. Thank you. But yeah, so if you use this method, if I dequip the item now, you have this bit of an awkward pause. And that's why this method is not the best. Okay, especially in games like this. In first-person games, you might be able to get away with it, but not for third person. All right, and the next method that we're going to discuss is also going to be a bit rough for these things. The third method is going to be the best, but we got to go through the second method first. Okay, now the other way, which is a bit more of a recommendable one, is to use animated override controllers. All right, I'm going to go ahead and delete this, because now idle and walking, they're the only ones that we're going to be using. Then override controllers are going to take care of the rest. The way override controllers work is like this. So if I go ahead and say that I want a character override controller, then I want to say character torch controller, like so. Then I can say that I want this override controller to use my base controller, like so. And then it's asking me for an idle and a walking, which I can give it. I can say standing torch idle and standing torch walk forward. All right, now I can just simply come in here and substitute on my animator with the one that I'm using. All right, you see where this is going? Now I can just walk and stop walking. Okay, so now my items, instead of holding the name of the animation they want to go to, they can hold the override controller that they should be using. Okay, so if we do that, something along those lines. So can I just say override controller? There we go. And then we can say just animation controller. And now it's no longer a string, so I'm just going to get rid of that. And now, changing our logic a little bit, we can just simply say that we want our animator.controller, runtime animator controller, to be the current item's animation controller. Okay, now you should have a default controller over here. So animator controller, is that a thing? Controller parameter, what was it called? Animator controller. Can I just do this doable? Yeah, I think this is doable. So private animator controller, default controller, and you can just say that you want the default controller to be the animator's runtime animator controller. Or do I need to say runtime? Yeah, there we go. Runtime animator controller. Okay, so something along these lines. And then if it is null, so we want to dequip the item, then we want to say that the animator.runtime animator controller is the default controller. Oops. Default controller. Okay, so it sort of behaves in the same way, but not really. Okay, I feel like this is a bit more organized and I like it a bit better. It's still not great because of the same reason. Okay, if I go ahead, did I populate This I did not. There we go. I'm going to give this guy the standard default one. And now, if I save, now I'm walking. Okay, if I equip the item, I now have the torch. Now there are a lot of bad things about this. Okay, I feel like this is one of the more organized ways of doing it, but as far as I know, there is no way of doing a soft fade between these. Okay, it's either all or nothing. So this is really good, again, for first person games, because you can kind of get away with it, right? But for third person games, it's a bit jarring. Right, but as you can see, it's very easy to use. You just need to download the animations, set them up, create the override controller, give it to the item, you're done. Okay, whereas with the other one, you would have to copy, create the transitions, and set everything up, which can get very, very tedious if you have big trees of actions. Okay, which brings us to our last method of doing these types of things, which is layers. Okay. Now, layers over here are essentially ways of blending between animations on top of each other, if that makes sense. But that's the standard thing that a layer is for. So, for example, if you're walking and you want your walk animation to stay the same, but you just want your right arm to move for whatever reason, then you'd use a layer that is responsible for only moving your right arm. However, that is not all layers are for. Okay, and I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So if I go ahead and I create a torch layer, all right, I can set this to be a sync. Okay, as soon as I do that, you see my idle and walking showing up here, which means that now my torch layer is in sync with my base layer. Okay, if I go ahead and say that the torch layer instead is using is this it? Yep, there we go. And for my walking, I want my torch walking. Okay, and I say play the game. Okay, I can now say that if my weight is 1, you see that? It's transitioning between the two. Okay, even better, if I'm walking, okay, I don't think I can show you these two at the same time, but I'm gonna, yeah, I can't, but it's okay. I'm going to say that I'm going to remove this just so we don't set it up. All right, oops, wrong project again. If I walk, it's not going to stop walking. And if I change to my torch layer, you see that? It changes smoothly. Okay, so it's completely in sync with your base layer, which is great for situations like these. Okay, now the downside with this is that you'd have to create a lot of layers for this, but you know, it's not that bad. And also there's another downside with this, okay, which is you can't, you know, if you add an animation to your sync layer, it also adds it to the base layer and vice versa. Now, there are ways of dealing with that. You know, you can just not call some animations while you're in the layer. You know, it's not that hard to get around. And so that's why I prefer this method. The pros overweight the cons by a lot. Now, how can we use this, right? How can we use this through code? Well, very simple, actually. If I go ahead, I can just say Animator. Well, actually, I lie. We need to update our item first. Now, there are ways, I believe the only way you can update a layer is through its index. Okay, so you would need to say public int layer animation layer index. Let's say that this is 1, for example. Okay, which is the torch layer index over here. So base layer is layer 0, torch layer is layer 1. Okay, now we can use that to say Animator dot set weight, set layer weight. Okay, what's the layer index? It's the index that we just set up on our item, right? And the weight here, which is going to say 1f. Okay, and then we're going to do the same over here. We're going to say 0f. Okay, and now we don't need the default controller anymore, and that is all we need for now. Okay, with that said, is that all we need? I believe it is. Okay, so if I now press E, it changes to the torch layer. Q, Oh, object reference not set to an instance of an object. Okay, okay, what's going on here? Animator.set later wait. Oh, right, because the current, yeah. We need to do this before we set the item to null. Okay, whoops, once again. And there we go. So E goes to this layer. There we go. Q goes back to the other layer. Okay. And there we go. We can change between the two. Now, you can just use a simple lerp to do this smoothly. Okay, and this is how. So private float current transition value. It's going to be 0. 0. Private float target transition value. Okay. Now, this actually, we're not going to do it this way because it's doing it this way requires a bit more setup. Okay, we're going to do it with coroutines. All right, so private I enumerator change item coroutine, or rather equip item coroutine. Equip item coroutine. Okay. Then we're also going to need a dequip item coroutine, but we'll get there. Okay. So float current transition value. It's going to start at 0, and while current transition value transition value is less than 1f, we're going to increase it. Plus equals time delta time. Okay, and we're going to yield return null, and this is how you do kind of a contained update. Okay, is this all we need? No, it's not. We need to say that we want animator.set layer index. Now, what layer? It needs to know. So int layer. So let's give it here. Or I guess we could do with the current item, but this way you make it a bit more self-contained. Okay, so layer set layer current transition value, and then, well, you know what? We're going to make this a bit more generic. So we're going to, instead of equip item coroutine, we're going to say change layer coroutine. Int layer, and then float target value. Okay. Oh no, this doesn't work. Never mind. We're going to keep it simple. We're going to keep it simple. Yeah, we're going to keep it simple. There we go. Never mind. We're going to have a private equip item coroutine and a private dequip item coroutine. Dequip item coroutine, which does the opposite. So it starts at 1, and then while it's higher than 0, and it goes to minus equal. There we go. Okay, and I believe that's all we need. Yeah. So now I can just say, let me cut this. Start coroutine, equip item coroutine. Yeah, there we go. Semicolon, and then start coroutine, dequip item coroutine. Okay, and there you go. And that's how we do a bit of a contained coroutine, sorry, layer change. Now you could make this very much more dynamic, okay, to change layers, because there are a few issues with this that we're going to have a look at. So there you go. Okay, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I'm moving or not. Okay, it's smooth no matter what you're doing. Okay, which is the great advantage of this method. Now this is, what are you complaining about? Dequip item coroutine, current item, layer index. What are you on about? Oh, I probably selected dequip without having an item. Okay, it's fine. It's fine. Just going to re-enable this. Okay. And that's sort of the end of the tutorial there, because I could talk for hours about how to improve this. All right, because now you have an issue, right? There's the next issue is, what if you want to put more layers on top of it, right? Because if I now wanted to equip another item, right, we would need to make sure that it had more weight than the torch, right? And the layer that is, well, in this case on top, but lower, the layer that is lower with the higher weight always has a priority. right? So there's a problem there. So what you would need to do is make sure, for example, when I equip the torch, I would need to lower the weight of the base layer. Okay, you would have to do that, and so that requires you to keep track of what the current layer is, and then while you lower one, you increase the other, and that's a bit out of the scope of this tutorial. Okay, this is essentially how you do multiple animations for item changes smoothly like that. Okay, I've used this several times in my projects, both in the Stormlight and Escape of Storms, and I am using it in Scraptail at the moment as well. Okay, so there you go. There's a smooth item change. All right, any questions? Don't be scared to post them either here on YouTube. Okay, I'm happy to answer. Okay, so we're going to leave that there for now, and we're going to carry on with Scraptail development.